Thanks, Chad. Good morning, everybody. So I thought it was interesting yesterday, Greg McCune said that basically when you're really tired, it's the equivalent of being drunk. And I can tell you from some of the breakfast interactions I had this morning, where some of you were drunk and some of you were tired, it looked exactly the same. So to that I say, nicely done, Trace 3, nicely done. So I'm excited to be here today. Here's where the story starts. I want to tell you about a trip that my family took to Disney World a few years ago. How many of you have been to Disney World? Actually, do the snapping thing. I like the snapping thing. How many of you been to Disney World? Okay, so this should be a highly relatable story. We went 3 years ago, and the big mistake for us is that we actually went at the end of the year. So it was around the holiday season. We thought this would be a great Christmas present for the kids. And we did one of those 3 park passes. And basically, the 3 park pass, it gets you into, the different parks. And we found through the 3 days that our favorite ride was in the Hollywood Studios park. The ride that we loved as a family was called the Aerosmith Rockin' Roller Coaster. Now, snap your fingers if you've been on that ride. Okay, so some of you have. We're a crazy roller coaster family. And so we had to try this out. And, I was an 80s hair metal guy. So, like, rock and roll and roller coaster, this has got to be good. For those of you who don't know anything about that ride, here's the claim to fame for the rock and roller coaster. The claim to fame is that when you sit on the ride and you sit in this vehicle that's formed and fashioned to look like an Aerosmith limo, when you sit in this vehicle, the claim to fame is that it launches you from 0 to 57 miles an hour in 2 seconds. Now, in typical roller coaster form, there's about a 2-hour line to get on this ride. So the family was gritting it out in line, and I think you can imagine all the weaving that you do and the ropes. And when you're standing in line, you naturally have conversations with other people who are either really excited about riding it for the first time or have ridden it before. Now, do you know what I'm talking about? Have you had these conversations? And the anticipation just really builds up. But what they've done, and I think it's pretty genius on their part, is they've set this thing up so that when you get to the end of the line, you're standing there behind a chain-linked fence. And you see the limos pull up, and happy and scared at the same time families jumping into the limo. And then you hear Steven Tyler, the singer of Aerosmith, starts to scream out a countdown where he counts down from 5 to 1. And then literally, as you're staring through this chain-linked fence, you see that roller coaster shoot into this dark tunnel. And when it shoots into the tunnel, there's all of these bright strobe lights that start going off, which you later find out is them taking photos of you. And they're brilliant photos. So we stand in line, we're watching through the chain-linked fence, we're seeing people shoot through, and we have all this anticipation. And I'm having this moment. I'm standing there thinking to myself, my daughter is 9 years old. What am I doing taking her on this ride? And fortunately, she was grinning ear to ear and could not wait to get on the ride. Now, here's what I'll tell you about the rock and roller coaster. Even after standing in line for 2 hours, talking about the ride with every person who will listen, and even after you have a glimpse of its glory right before you get on the ride, when that ride takes off and you go 0 to 57, it takes your breath away. Totally takes your breath away. And here's what I'll tell you about that rock and roller coaster. We didn't ride it just once. Of course, we had a great time. Now, the kids actually love riding on it because they love listening to Christine, cuss profusely the whole time. So like if 8 words come out of her mouth while we're riding on the roller coaster, 7 of them are cuss words. So the kids love that. They want to go through it again. We go through the line again and we ride it a second time. Here's what I'll tell you about the second time. Sitting down in that roller coaster and being launched 0 to 57 miles an hour takes your breath away. And I kind of feel that roller coaster, it's a good reminder of why change leadership is important. Because at the end of the day, when really big change happens in the place that we work, it takes our breath away. You see, just like the roller coaster at work, sometimes we know change is coming. People are talking about it. They're anticipating it. Sometimes we've even experienced that change in our own careers. Sometimes we get a glimpse of that change as it's being tested and it's getting ready to roll out, just like looking through the chain-linked fence. And we still have the moment when that big change happens, it takes our breath away. It takes our breath away. I know this firsthand from 25 years of working in the IT field. And I'll tell you that I really experienced this in the 14 years of being a CIO. Change takes people's breath away. And I became so fascinated as a CIO, so obsessed with change and why is change so hard in organizations. And I was so convinced that the change management way of doing things wasn't helping anything. I was convinced of that. Here's what I've learned about change. Change management makes this an end user problem. And what I mean by that is we get ready to roll out a new system and we drive communications into the organization and we push training. And we expect when we do those things that people in our companies that we work in are going to just do what we want them to do. And when they don't do what we want them to do, we give them more training and communications. It's like the beatings will continue until the morale improves. Change is not an end user problem. In my view, in my experiences, things I've learned the hard way, change is a leadership problem. And I want to clarify when I say leadership, because the second I say it's a leadership problem, it generally becomes everyone else's problem but our own. Here's what I mean when I say leadership. I'm talking about executive leaders. I'm talking about project leaders. I'm talking about grassroots influencers. So for those of you in the audience, most of you are in one of those buckets. And change is our problem. It's not the end user problem. I think about G.K. Chesterton. He's an English writer and poet. And he was asked by the London Times, hey, what's wrong with the world today? And G.K.'s response was, dear sir, I am. You think about your organizations. If I asked you today, what's wrong in your organizations today? What I'm talking about from a change leadership perspective is, dear sir, I am. That to lead the change, we got to be the change. So here's how I think about change leadership. I've heard references to Patrick Lencioni several times the last couple of days, but I just want to ask those of you in the audience, how many of you know who Patrick Lencioni is? He's written a book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. He's written another book called The Advantage. He's basically sold 5 million copies of his book. And here's Patrick's point of view on organizational health. His point of view is for companies to succeed, they have to be healthy and they have to be smart. Healthy? Well, let me start with smart. Smart is marketing, it's IT, it's strategy, it's finance. And healthy is minimal politics, it's minimal confusion, crystal clear clarity in the organization. High productivity, low turnover. In Pat's view, companies don't fail because they aren't smart enough. And I kind of think from a change perspective, if you click down a level away from that sort of organizational health and you talk about change itself, I feel like the work that we do is the same way. For our projects to be successful, they have to be smart and they have to be healthy. Smart is good engineering. It's solid project management. It's rigorous QA. It's stabilized support and operations. It's all of the things that we manage in this room today. And healthy, just as Pat says, is minimal politics, minimal confusion, crystal clear clarity. And in my view, when it comes to projects, I rarely see projects fail because they aren't smart enough. Rather, projects fail because they aren't healthy enough. That the people-related groundwork that has to be done to drive change into our organizations, if that is not done, we don't have any chance of surviving. Now, I talked about in the roller coaster, people in our organizations going breathless when there's change. Now, how do I know that? How do I know that to be true? I know that to be true because Gallup says that 70% of all change initiatives fail. 70%. And they also report that the US economy loses $150 billion a year to failed IT projects. And if you look at really big project failure in the IT world, 17% of those failures actually take their companies out of business. Now, if you're like me, when you first hear those numbers, you're like, those numbers are loaded. There is no way that that's what's going on in the world today. But you could see from Julie's presentation, she put up a stat. And I think the stat is validation that our organizations are struggling with change. And that stat is that from 1999 to 2009, a 10-year period, there was a 50% topple rate in the Fortune 500. That says to me that companies are struggling with change. And I believe, for all of us in this room, that change is not an end-user problem. That change leadership is about the healthy side of our projects and doing the people-related groundwork. You see, the companies that succeed versus fail when it comes to change are the ones who put people before things. Always. Now, I have a point of view that there are 7 conditions that leaders influence that will either drive an organization to successful change or will drive the organization to unsuccessful change. We don't have time to go through all 7 today, so I'm going to just share 3 of them with you. And here's my point of view on this. 3 of them, and not all 3 that I share with you today, are things that are enabling to people for change, meaning that if executives don't do these things, it doesn't matter what any of us in this room do, we are absolutely set up to fail when it comes to projects. And then, I believe after those 3 things are properly put in place, the table is set for change, then there are 4 things that we do to activate people for change while we're driving change into our organizations. So you're going to get a little bit of both today. And here's where I want to start. I want to start with something that enables people for change. And this dimension, this condition, is around alignment. Now let me say with these conditions, this is really important for me to say this. It is not a one-size-fits-all methodology. I am not pushing methodology to you today. All I'm saying is that there are conditions that influence whether people in the companies we work will accept the change we're pushing. And it's not an all or none proposition. If you do just a little bit of it, it will make a little bit of difference. If you do a lot of it, it will make a lot of difference. And when I go through these, you're going to kind of slap your head and go, gosh, no duh. And what I find from the conversations we have with our clients is that even when they slap their forehead and they say no duh, they basically follow that up with no way, I'm not doing that. So this is where change leadership is about us. Dear sir, I am. So alignment. Everybody knows that when we're sitting in the boat and we're rowing in the same direction, that nobody can stop us. But here's what I mean when I say alignment. What I mean when I say alignment is that we have gotten our people together in our organization to focus on the why versus the what. So to explain that to you, I want to take you on an imaginary road trip. Do you like road trips? Oh, good, yeah. Yeah, some of you like road trips. I like road trips. We're going to jump in a 1986 Chevrolet Chevette. That seems like a road-hardened road trip kind of vehicle. And we're going to leave Vegas tomorrow, you and I, and we're going to go to New York City. And we've decided that we're going to pick 3 of our friends from this event to go with us. Because no road trip is a worthy road trip unless there are more people in the vehicle than the vehicle is intended to hold. And so we decide we're going to go to New York City, and you and I are fast movers. So when we made that decision, we got right on it. My job is to go get the Chevette serviced and maintained and ready to go. I've got to get the oil changed and the tires rotated. Your job is to pick up the provisions for the road trip. So you're going to get all the things that a worthy road trip need to have, like beef jerky, potato chips, water, and like some 1980s CDs, like Duran Duran and Devo. Now, we ask our 3 friends to get out an atlas. For millennials in the audience, an atlas is like a map. And we ask our friends to map out the course that we're going to take to go to New York City. And in 24 hours, we meet back. I've got the car serviced. You've got the provisions. We're feeling good about this trip. But our 3 friends are embroiled in an argument. You see, one of them thinks that we should take the fastest path to New York City. Shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and he has mapped point A to point B in a straight line for us to go to New York City. Our second friend wants to do a road trip that goes through the rural roads of America. So he is not taking us the most direct route, but we are going to see a lot of America when we do this trip. Our third friend is giving us a blend of both, a little bit of direct path and a little bit of rural roads. Now what happens is, this causes you and I to start talking about this trip to New York. And it turns out that you and I got aligned on the what. What we were going to do was drive to New York City. But it turned out that our underlying whys were much different. You see, I'd been to New York City before, but never had seen the back roads of America and wanted to do a true road trip through the rural roads of America. You have never been in New York City, and you wanted to catch some Broadway, you wanted to see the Statue of Liberty and other attractions, so a direct path was good for you. And do you see in this scenario, this is what happens in corporate America every day. We agree to the what. And the mapping to New York City, all those different routes represent different strategy, the how we're going to get there. But we didn't ground ourselves on the why. And it turned out that while it looked like we were aligned, we really weren't that aligned at all. Now think about that in terms of the technology projects we work on, where these projects become a what discussion. Let's say, for an example, that we've decided that we want to grow and develop our team members. Our team members are giving us feedback that they're leaving the company because they're not being grown and developed. So we decide that we need a new talent management software system to help grow and develop our people. So we can track performance management, we can track succession planning, and we can offer a great course, list of courses around training opportunities for people, learning opportunities. But what happens is it becomes an HR system discussion, a talent management discussion. And you know that downstream, when you're executing on a project like that, when we're doing it for different whys, it impacts the way we design the system. It impacts the requirements going into the system. And by the way, when we go out into the organization and we trumpet to the world, hey, we're going to roll out an HR system, who really jumps up and cheers? So where people get compelled and where they're moved and where they're driven is out of purpose and the why. We all go to work for different reasons. Some of us go to work for money. Some of us go to work because we want progressive responsibility. Some of us go to work because we want to be grown and developed. But you know that the data says that most all of us go to work every day because we want to make a difference? And who can make a difference when they're connected to the what and not connected to the why? So for leaders, talking about the why is important. Now, if you're sitting in the room going, God, those stupid executives in my company, they will never talk about the why. Our role in that is to go out in the organization and talk about the why, to remind the end users that we're rolling solutions out to, this is why we're doing it. And we have to keep asking our leaders when we're doing the work, why are we doing this work? The second condition I want to talk to you about, Greg McCune covered a lot more effectively yesterday than I can, but it's around capacity. And it's a basic concept. The basic concept is when we're really busy in our day-to-day jobs, we don't have time to adopt and adapt something new. Let me tell you about an experiment that happened on the campus of Princeton University in 1963. Two psychologists, Darley and Batson. And what Darley and Batson did was they got a group of seminarians and they gave them an assignment. They said, we want you to report to a place on the campus and we want you to give a speech on the Good Samaritan. And they did this with several students, and when the students would show up to give their speech, right when the students would walk in the room, Darley and Batson would play a cruel mind trick on them. They'd say, hey, listen, bad news, this talk you're giving on the Good Samaritans actually on the other side of campus. Now, for one group of students, they told them, hey, bad news, your talk is on the other side of campus, but the good news is you have plenty of time to get to the other side. The second group, they told them, hey, bad news, you're in the wrong place, you got to go to the other side of campus, and you have just the right amount of time to get to the other side. The third group, they came in, they said, hey, bad news, this talk you're supposed to give, it's on the other side of campus, and you are already late. Now, along the path between where they were and where they had to talk, they had rigged this man who was laying on the sidewalk. And when you approached the man, you couldn't tell if he was just beaten up, if he was having a medical condition, or if he just got done with like a top of the rock party at a Trace 3 Evolve conference. All you knew was that he needed help. Now, for the students that were told that they had more than enough time to get to the other side of campus, 63% of the students stopped to help the man. For the second group, the group that was told you have just enough time, 45% of the students stopped to help the man. And for the group that was told, hey, you don't have enough time and you're already late to get to the other side of campus, 10% of those students stopped to help the man. Now here's the punchline, the real punchline of this story. It turned out that Darley and Batson actually profiled every student that they invited into the experiment. So from a base level, the students had the same value system. And in fact, they were giving a speech on the Good Samaritan, which is all about helping a stranger that's laying on the sidewalk. But only 10% stopped when they didn't have enough time. This happens every day in the companies that we work in. People have a 40-hour-a-week job. We give them a new system. It takes them 10 hours a week for 5 weeks to learn it. And the question I would ask is, where do they get the time to do that? And I'm sad to stand up here and say to you that as an executive, I expected that people would give discretionary effort. And let me tell you, they don't. And here's why they don't. You know why they don't, because we're all those people. We put our discretionary effort into our significant others, into our children, to our friends, to the nonprofits, the churches. We are taking care of sick and dying parents. If we want people to accept change, and it takes them 10 hours a week for 5 weeks to learn something new, then we have no choice but to give them that time to be able to learn that stuff. Now, how do you impact that if you're not one of the crazy executives signing up people to do 80 hours of work a week? You impact that with your voice. When Hayes was doing his talk yesterday, it struck a lot of chords with me as a leader. And the one thing he talked about is, as a leader, you don't always get the truth. And leaders need to hear the truth. And you need to know that when you bring the truth to a leader and you have other people with you, the more people that are bringing the truth, the better. So it's about speaking up. Some of you in this room are project managers. So you actually have tools that can quantify busy so executives can understand that. Here's the last condition I want to talk about. I want to talk about stakeholder engagement. And that's a really fancy word. So I want to just boil it down to the simplest pieces and parts. And I want to tell you a story to get you there. At Red Robin, we had a quarterly ops meeting. Every quarter, we brought in our best 12 general managers and regional operations directors from around the country. And the first day, we talked about the business and what was working and what was not working. And the second day was about celebrations for their really great performance. And when we talked about what was working and not working, we sat in a circle, shoulder to shoulder, nameless, rankless, and people were allowed to go around the room and with straight talk about what wasn't working. And the first one of these I attended was in Key Largo, Florida, and I'm sitting there as a brand new CIO, and they're going around the room, and the operators from around the country, these, again, really successful general managers, start saying, you know, you're not communicating. And the executives were busy writing notes down, and it went around and somebody else said, yeah, you guys just aren't communicating with us. And I was struck as a new team member about how seriously the executives were taking this. And the executives told the operators, hey, we're going to go back to Denver, to our corporate headquarters, and we're going to action plan this. And we go back to Denver, and we have all these cross-functional meetings about communications, and we come up with a solution that we think is going to be right for the organization. We deploy that solution, and we start communicating, we think, more effectively. The next quarterly ops meeting was in Bend, Oregon. And when I went there, it was like Christmas morning for me. Like, I couldn't wait to hear the operators, say like, oh my God, you listened to us, the communication was bad and you made it better and everything is great now. And so we're sitting shoulder to shoulder in the circle and everyone's taking turns with what's working and what's not working. And communications came up again. But it wasn't on the what's working list. It was on the what's not working list. If I spare you the torture, this went on for 2 years. And we kept action planning and kept action planning. And it turns out, and this was a really big revelation, I think it impacts you personally and professionally. It's something to check when someone is saying to you, you're not communicating. It turned out the punchline was, what they were really saying is, you're not listening. So stakeholder engagement is a fancy way of saying, we've got to tune in our corporate listening ears. Now at Red Robin, we ended up using Pop-In to do that. You heard a little bit about Pop-In yesterday. For us, this was an important way to get people's feedback because the 60 regional operations directors from around the country basically acted like senators, only taking care of their constituents. And half the time when they were giving us feedback, it was hard to discern if the thing they were struggling with was an organizational problem. So we were able to use a tool like Pop-In to build a common voice and to make sure that we, whatever topic it was that we were going to action plan, actually was sitting at the heart and soul of every operator. But here's what was really important. Hayes has a quote. I love this quote. I steal it all the time, and I'm stealing it right in front of him right now. And the quote is this: most people think that when leaders don't ask their people for their opinion, that's the worst thing you can do. And actually, the worst thing you can do is ask them their opinion and not do anything about it. So we were able to use Pop-In to action plan and show the operators that the things that they were talking about and telling us was important. And to activate people for change, to get them excited about change, they've got to be a part of the process. It's not because of buy-in, though. Let me just say that. The data says it's not about buy-in. The data says if you tell people what you're doing and you tell them why you're going to do it, that you'll get the same results as if you let them participate in the process. But it's about activating them and bringing them in to solve the problem with you. Because a lot of times, people that are closest to the action really know what the problems are. Here's where I want to finish the discussion today, to summarize all of this. When I worked at Red Robin, I became really obsessed with the industry. It really actually impacted our family's ability to go out and have a good dinner once in a while, because I was always in there dissecting what was going on in restaurants. And I could tell you, I would be in other restaurants, and I would hear a guest in that restaurant, I would overhear a guest complaining about their experience to a manager. Like, my God, I got the worst service in the world today. And almost every complaint that I would hear would be followed up with this one-liner. And maybe you've said it. I know I've said it. They would say, I got really bad service today, and it's just not that hard. Here's what I've learned. This is not a problem of hard. This is a problem of care. We all want our customers to love us. And I am standing up here to tell you today, your customers will never love you if your team members don't love you. And love is a strong word, and it results from this change leadership stuff that I'm talking about. And I promise you that if your team members only like the place that they work, that you will build customers that only like you. And even worse, if your team members hate you, if they hate the place they work, they hate the brand they serve, they will most certainly lose your customers who will grow to hate your brand. Dear sir, I am. To lead the change, we got to be the change. If you're interested in learning more, People Before Things, the book will be out in March. I'd encourage you to buy it. Certainly give me a call. I'm glad to talk about this stuff all day long. And I'm really grateful to spend 2 days with you here in Las Vegas. God bless.